Hey music nerds, fans, and maybe even bands. I'm Ivan, and I'm so alone, so very alone. Please someone help me from this agony. And welcome back to another Airplane Over the Teen video. I hope you're doing so very well. Part of my goal on this channel is to talk about music that people don't talk about as much. I try to talk about a wide variety of music, but usually stuff that isn't already talked about all the time and in like 500 other videos, with admittedly a few exceptions. So to keep with that theme, I thought it could be fun to go through 5 albums that I feel like I don't see enough people talking about, but I think they really deserve to be talked about because they're absolutely amazing. So let's get into it. This is one of the only albums from before around 2018 that I actually listened to when it came out and still love. Here and Nowhere Else by Cloud Nothing. Here and Nowhere Else is a brilliant post-hardcore pop-punk album that is an absolute blast through every second of its runtime. Cloud Nothings have made 2 albums that I think are near perfect, the other being Attack on Memory, which was the album before this, but I wanted to talk about this one because I think I probably prefer it. This album has so much energy, and you can tell that the musicians are incredibly in tune with each other. Every single track on here is brilliant. Now Herein opens the album really well, and definitely sets the stage for the rest of the project. Quieter Today has a very catchy chorus that I love yelling along to, and Psychic Trauma is probably my second favorite track on the whole album, with 2 sections I absolutely love. Just See Fear is one of the most catchy songs on the album, with a hook that gets stuck in my head quite a bit. I want to talk about every track on here, but there are 4 other albums that I need to talk about, and there's one song that I know I need to talk about, because it's one of the best pieces of music I've ever heard. Pattern Walks. This 7-minute long, doomy, noisy, and incredible punk banger is one of my very favorite songs ever. Opening with a super fuzzy bass riff and immediately going into the first verse with so much intensity until going into an anthemic chorus in true Cloud Nothings fashion and just keeping the momentum for the entire track. Pattern Walks is the centerpiece of this album in my eyes, and definitely the standout track. I feel like the band never really reached the same heights as this album after it came out. Their subsequent projects are just kind of forgettable and just don't hit the same for me. Still, this album is truly incredible, and I'd highly recommend it. I'm going to be honest with you. In the past year or 2, I've definitely listened to more music that's very popular on online music circles. I feel like I used to discover a lot more unknown music before, and now it feels more rare that I'll discover music on my own. One of my favorite albums from before I ran into this problem of sorts, it's not really a problem, but I don't know what else to call it, is COVET's Effloresce. This album is a great twinkly math rock project with some truly beautiful songs. Shibuya is a song that I've listened to way too many times to count. It's got everything I love about this album rolled into one song, with beautiful riffs, a great twinkly sound, and very impressive musicianship. The band's guitarist, Yvette Young, is an astoundingly talented musician who in my eyes has kind of mastered the math rock sound. The musicians are totally locked in on this whole thing for the entire runtime, even when they're playing mind-meltingly complicated parts. Falcor is a great long song that doesn't overstay its welcome at all in my opinion. It's definitely a top favorite from the album. I haven't really listened to any of COVET's other work. If you've heard it, please tell me what you think of it because I'd be curious to hear it. But this album is just excellent and brings me back to a simpler time. This next project has an incredibly interesting story in both the way I found it, but more importantly, the story behind its release. Ronnie Vega was a rapper from West Philadelphia. He made an EP in 2015 with a band of a few rock musicians, and then another in 2017. In 2020, he tragically passed away, and his bandmates decided that they'd release these 2 EPs together as one project called 2 EPs. A few months after the pandemic started, I saw a Pitchfork article about it and decided to give the project a listen, and I really enjoyed it. It mixes grungy hard rock and punk with rapping quite well, and despite sounding very DIY, it's really great. The DIY sound actually works pretty well for it. It kind of feels like you're in the room with the band while they're absolutely destroying their instruments. Ronnie has a pretty odd way of rapping that fits the rock instrumentals in a pretty unique way. Lieutenant Dan is a great opener with a cool bass bass line and a good hook. Scumbag is another track with a catchy hook, and while I don't think I like it quite as much as Lieutenant Dan, it's still very enjoyable. Some of these instrumentals have a more punk sound, while some have a more grunge sound, which adds some nice variety. This project is kind of odd, but as a result, it's truly magical in my eyes. I wish more people knew about this project because it's the only music released by Ronnie and his band, which I find pretty sad. From the little research I did, it looks like Ronnie, whose real name was Kieran Kottman, was a very kind and giving individual. It's really sad that he didn't even make it to be 30, and it would have been really interesting to see what his progression as a musician would be. But we have these 8 great songs, and I think that they're a good way of preserving his memory. Rest easy, Callum. Next up is another rock-infused rap album that came out last year, Boy Anonymous by Paris, Texas. I first became aware of Paris, Texas when they released their single Heavy Metal last year, which was definitely one of my favorite songs of the year. The heavy guitars mixed with the amazing flows and bars made a really intriguing song that I absolutely love. I listened to this album last year once, but didn't really revisit it at all. But recently, I've been getting back into it, and it's absolutely amazing. Casino is an incredible opening track with a really cool trap beat that's reminiscent of someone like Playboi Carti. Yeah. And with some great bars as well. I love how it transitions into Pack for the Low, which has a very different vibe, but it still works very well. There are some songs on here that feel more like indie pop songs, like Situations or Area Code, and I really appreciate that variety. I could probably talk about how much I love every song on here because I've been listening to it quite a bit in the past few weeks, and they're all great songs. These guys are really good rappers and songwriters, and they definitely have potential to be quite popular. I was actually supposed to see these guys open for Brockhampton, but that's not happening anymore. Yeah, these guys definitely do have a Brockhampton vibe for sure, but they're still definitely their own thing. A little after they released this album, Paris, Texas released an EP called Red Hand Akimbo that's also very good and has a more manic and hardcore energy. These guys are definitely a group to watch because I see big things in their future, and all the music they've put out so far has been awesome. Alright, I saved the best for last because this next album is one of my very favorite albums ever made. There's a ton of history about this band and album that I've pretty much memorized, but I don't want to spend too much time on it because this video would be very long if I went through all of it. So here's a slightly short version. In the early to mid 70s, 3 brothers from Detroit formed a band called Death. They played super loud and fast rock music that would drive their family and neighbors absolutely crazy, but they were really great. They decided to make an album, but it was very hard to get signed for a multitude of reasons. Mainly 2. One was the name. No one wanted to sign a band called Death because it was just too dark of a name. Another big one is that labels didn't think signing a rock band of 3 black brothers was marketable, despite how great they were. They finally were able to record their first album, but it ended up getting scrapped after releasing a single. The brothers went their separate ways, with 2 of them forming a new reggae band, and with the guitarist and main force of the group, David, dying in the early 2000s. If you want the rest of the band's history, go watch the documentary A Band Called Death, because it's seriously amazing, and it's just such a great story that I think the original documentary just does more justice to than I could. In 2009, Death's 1975 album, For the Whole World to See, was finally released. Now we get to actually talking about this album. This is definitely a top 10 album for me, possibly even a top 5. Something that makes the band very interesting is that they sound just like a punk band, but they wrote the songs 2 years before punk really existed. The raw energy and fast tempos mixed with the political inspired lyrics sounded exactly like a punk rock band, but they were doing this before punk was even a thing. Every song on here is absolutely phenomenal, from the anthemic and catchy opening track Keep On Knockin' to the breakneck speed and energy of Freaking Out. There's no dull moment anywhere on here. My favorite song on here is probably Let the World Turn, which has a great down-tempo opening that turns into a super fast and fun punky groove. It's an amazing experience of a song. The closing track, Politicians in My Eyes, is definitely one of the best on the album, with a really cool opening riff and anthemic chorus. This is just a terrific album, and I'd highly recommend it to anyone. No matter who you are, I urge you to listen to it. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is my first real list video aside from my 2021 video, and I really enjoy doing this kind of thing. You've probably noticed that I've been releasing videos a little less consistently, which is mostly because of my new school schedule, which is more busy than before, as well as my new album that I'm making. I'm still going to be posting videos, but they'll be a little more spaced out, like they have been for the past couple weeks. I hope you've been enjoying them regardless, because I really do love making them, and I hope to see you in the next one.